We begin today's World Report broadcast with a story of horror from the heart of Kashmir's breathtaking valleys, which have now been stained with blood. At around 3 p.m. Tuesday, viewers, gunfire shattered the serenity of Basiran. It's also known as Mini Switzerland. It's just 6 kilometers from Pahalgam. At least 26 lives were cut short when terrorists opened fire on unsuspecting tourists. Among the dead, an Indian Navy officer, more government officers and families who had come for peace and not war. Eyewitnesses speak of names being asked before bullets flew. A woman watched her husband die right beside her, viewers. Eyewitnesses also speak of these names. Now, bodies also lay in meadows once known for laughter and pony rides. The Resistance Front, an affiliate of Pakistan-operated terror group Lashkar-e-Taiba, has claimed responsibility. A massive manhunt, meanwhile, is underway. The Indian Army, CRPF and police have been working through the night. Meanwhile, PM Modi cut short his Saudi trip, returning home to lead a high-level security meeting. There will be no one spared, the PM has vowed. In the latest, meanwhile, security agencies have released sketches of 3 terrorists involved in the cowardly attack. As the nation mourns, Jammu and Kashmir has become a site of silent tears and salutes. The pain is fresh, but so is India's resolve. And from this tragedy, a stronger vow rises, one that underlines that Bharat will not bend to terror. My colleague Shivarur joins me for more on this. For all our viewers who are just joining in, we've begun today's World Report broadcast with a story of horror right from the heart of Kashmir's breathtaking valleys, which have now in fact been stained with blood. At around 3 p.m. Tuesday, gunfire shattered the serenity of Basiran, also known as Mini Switzerland. It's just 6 kilometers from Pahalgam. For your perspective, at least 26 lives have been cut short when terrorists opened fire on unsuspecting tourists. Among the dead, an Indian Navy officer and families who had come for peace and not war. Eyewitnesses speak of names being asked before the bullets flew. A woman, in fact, watched her husband die right beside her side. Meanwhile, bodies lay in meadows once known for laughter and pony rides. The Resistance Front, an affiliate of Pakistan-operated terrorist group Lashkar-e-Taiba, has claimed responsibility for the callous attack. Meanwhile, my colleague Shivarur joins us for the latest on the story. Shiv, given the TRF's known links with Lashkar-e-Taiba, what does this signal really about Pakistan-based proxy groups ramping up operations in Kashmir Valley now? And also, I'd like to ask you, how likely is a shift in deployment strategy in South Kashmir?
What I can tell you for sure is that, TRF, the Resistance Force, Tiger Force, etc., these are just shallow names for what is essentially the Lashkar-e-Taiba, which is a Pakistan government-sponsored terror group focused on Kashmir. So let's not give them too much legitimacy by, giving them an identity that is separate from the Lashkar-e-Taiba. This is the LET under Hafiz Mohammad Saeed, the very same group that has been operating, in Uri, in 2611 and beyond. So the fountainhead of terror, as far as India is concerned, is the Lashkar-e-Taiba and the Jaish-e-Mohammed, and the TRF, or whatever else they want to call themselves, is the Lashkar-e-Taiba. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect, as far as deployments are concerned, now remember that the current operational scenario in Jammu and Kashmir is obviously a story in motion. There is a security review that was conducted by Home Minister Amit Shah 2 weeks ago, during a couple of infiltrations that took place, especially in the Jammu division. And now he's done that afresh yesterday with the unified command structure, and he will be doing much more of it ahead of the Cabinet Committee on Security meeting later today. The important aspect to remember is the multi-agency effort in Jammu and Kashmir. There's going to be a huge challenge in it, not just in South Kashmir. Remember, Pahalgam is in Anantnag. It's 3 hours away from Srinagar. Security aspects across the board, not just in terms of deployment, but literally in terms of, shaking things up, finding out where the intelligence gaps really were. The fact that an entire paradigm has broken down now with tourists being fair game for terrorists means that, it's sort of back to square one in many ways. Certain rules of engagement will need to be revisited by the security forces as well, and that is all going to boil down to what kind of blueprint and roadmap the Indian government chooses to finalize during the Cabinet Committee on Security meeting.
Thank you so much for that, Shiv. My colleague Nazir Masoodi, in fact, also joins us from Pahalgam. Nazir, if you can hear me, can you elaborate on how local residents aided in the rescue operations, and moreover, what this says about the relationship between the local populace and both the state and the central governments, Nazir?
Well, if we see there is anger, people are showing that anger by carrying out protests. Here in Pahalgam a while back, there was a protest, people carrying placards and shouting slogans against terrorists, shouting slogans against those behind the massacre of innocent tourists, saying we are Indians and India is ours, showing their resolve that they cannot be cowed down, they cannot be scared by such attacks, and showing sympathy and empathy with the victim families. They say they feel ashamed that it has happened in Pahalgam, a popular tourist destination which has been made unpopular because of this horrific terror attack. Pahalgam is not just a popular tourist destination, it's also a base camp for Amarnath Yatra, and this is Amarnath Yatri's base camp here. Now this being set up because Yatra is just 2 months away, and this attack makes it much more serious, the situation that is unfolding. Home Minister Amit Shah today visited here. He visited the attack site also and took the stock of the situation so that he can brief Cabinet Committee on Security, which will be chaired by Prime Minister this evening in Delhi. So Government of India has taken the note of this situation at the highest level, and it appears that the response would be holistic, response would be befitting. It would not be just limited to this operation which is being carried out here in Pahalgam to track down the attackers, because more than attackers, it is those who are the handlers, who have allowed them to do this, who have sent them these, not only killed innocent people but also killed the image of Kashmir. And that's why for the first time we saw in last 35 years of militancy this complete shutdown in the valley. Mirwais Umar Farooq has called for the shutdown. Traders' bodies have called the shutdown. Ruling National Conference has called for shutdown. So is PDP and other groups. So this is first time we see all the groups from political divide coming together, sharing their grief, telling the world, telling those who attacked that we cannot be cowed down and we strongly condemn it, and this is not acceptable. So this is first time we see it happening in Kashmir, a complete shutdown, candlelight vigils, protests, people denouncing terror and violence of any form.
Well, Nazir, will indeed not cow down, that's for sure. One quick question to you, Nazir. How significant, there was, I believe, another infiltration attempt in Baramulla. How significant is that attempt in connection with the Pahalgam attack? Especially, and also, could these events very well be part of a coordinated effort to destabilize the bigger region? What are you picking up?
Well, these are two separate incidents. Pahalgam is like 300 kilometers away from the line of control. But having said that, this clearly shows that there are attempts from the other side to push in more militants to keep the pot boiling. Not only this infiltration attempt which army said they have filed, there was also a ceasefire violation in Poonch sector also. Because of this incident, whatever the decision the government will take, what would be the response, because it is much worse than the Pulwama attack, which led to those surgical strikes on Pakistan, these air strikes on Pakistan. This is much worse. And when you see the gravity and the seriousness with which government has taken it, Prime Minister cut short his Saudi Arab visit, came back immediately, in fact even avoided Pakistan's airspace, and first he was briefed at the airport itself by the National Security Advisor and Minister of External Affairs, Mr. Jaishankar, and then this evening there would be he will chair the Cabinet Committee on Security meeting. Home Ministry would brief the meeting about his visit to Srinagar. Yesterday he met the Chief Minister, held meeting with him, Lieutenant Governor and officials. Today he paid homage to the victims of this terror attack and then met the relatives of the these deceased. And Government of Jammu and Kashmir Chief Minister Umar Abdullah has announced an ex gratia of rupees 10 lakh for the relatives or for the next kin of the deceased, and 2 lakh rupees for the injured, and 1 lakh for those who have received minor injuries. While we talk about this Pahalgam, there's a hero of Pahalgam who was killed also yesterday, Sayyid Adil Hussain Shah. He's a Poniwala. When a tourist was killed, he was with him. He resisted terrorists, he fought them, and in the course he was also hit. He was also hit with bullets and he lost his life. In a while, his these funeral prayers will be held.
Thank you so much for getting us the latest from the ground, Nazir. We keep on following up with you. Meanwhile, the world also stood still as gunfire echoed through the meadows of Pahalgam. Within hours, in fact, global leaders broke their silence, their voices united in sorrow and fury. Deeply disturbing news from Kashmir, declared Donald Trump, vowing full support of the United States. In fact, that's not it. Trump also dialed PM Modi and expressed full support to India to bring to justice the perpetrators of this heinous attack. Meanwhile, from Moscow, Vladimir Putin's words cut through the cold finality. This brutal crime has no justification, Putin said. Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has called the massacre shocking, while Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu mourned the barbaric attack. Iran also issued a rare firm statement underlining it strongly condemns the terror attack. And across Europe, Ursula von der Leyen sent a message of solidarity, saying deepest condolences to every Indian grieving tonight, read her social media X post. In a fractured world, viewers, for one moment, every corner spoke the same truth. Terror has no place, and Kashmir's pain echoes far beyond its mountains and picturesque valleys. It's time we slip into a short break. I'll see you on the other side. Welcome back. You're watching The World Report. I'm Arjun, Samar, Mahendran. World leaders and thousands of mourners are preparing to say bid the final goodbye to Pope Francis, who passed away on Monday at 88 years of age, just hours after delivering his final Easter address. Now, the Pope's funeral will be held this Sunday at the St. Peter's Square, with 250,000 people expected in attendance. Notably, Pope Francis will be buried outside the Vatican at the Basilica of St. Mary Major, honoring his wish for a simple, humble burial. President Donald Trump, Ukraine's Zelensky, Britain's Prince William, and others will also be attending it. The Pope's body lies in his state until Friday, and in another departure from tradition, there will be no private viewing for cardinals. Now, after the service, a 9-day mourning period will begin, followed by the process to elect the next Pope. Ukrainian President Zelensky has said that Ukraine is ready to talk with Russia once a ceasefire is in place. The Financial Times is reporting that President Putin has in fact offered to freeze the war at current front lines and drop claims to full control of 4 Ukrainian regions. Meanwhile, U.S. State Envoy Steve Witkoff is heading to Moscow this week for another round of talks, while parallel meetings continue in London. Now, Trump's administration is reportedly considering a proposal to recognize Russia's hold on Crimea as part of a possible deal. Donald Trump has said that he has no intention of firing Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, walking back threats that he had in fact rattled markets in recent days. Despite the shift in tone, Trump kept up pressure on the Fed to cut interest rates, saying and rather underlining Powell should act clearly and not late. Wall Street cheered meanwhile. The de-escalation futures jumped nearly 2%. Trump also hinted at major tariff reductions in a trade deal with China is reached. But uncertainty still remains. The Fed has held rates steady since Trump's return, and inflation, in fact, risks tied to tariffs have made policymakers cautious. Meanwhile, the IMF has slashed its global growth forecast, citing Trump's trade policy as a top concern. The International Monetary Fund, or the IMF, has cut its global growth forecast, blaming heightened trade tensions led by steep U.S. tariffs under President Donald Trump. Global growth is now projected at 2.8% this year. The IMF warns of a potential recession in the US and also says growth in top trading partners like China and Mexico will also slow down. Meanwhile, for India, the outlook remains relatively steady at 6.2% for 2025. Though that's a slight dip from the earlier projections, this is due to global uncertainty and trade risks. US President Donald Trump says tariffs on Chinese goods will be lowered substantially, but won't go to zero as trade talks resume with Beijing. Current tariffs, for perspective, on Chinese imports are as high as 145%. Now, Trump says he's optimistic about a deal, but has also warned that if China doesn't agree or play ball, the US will dictate the terms. Now, this softer tone comes amid recession warnings and market turmoil, with Trump defending his strategy as a success despite pushback from global financial institutions. Elon Musk has said that he will significantly scale back his time working with the Trump administration, this as Tesla's financial health takes a serious hit. The company posted a 70% plunge in profits and a 20% drop in auto revenue in the first quarter of 2025. Now, Musk, who heads the government cost-cutting initiative DOGE and donated heavily also to Trump's re-election campaign, blamed political backlash for hurting demand. He now plans to in fact reduce his involvement in government matters to just a couple of days a week. Tesla also warned meanwhile that trade tensions, especially US tariffs on China, are disrupting supply chains. Meanwhile, protests and boycotts over Musk's political role continue globally. Investors remain skeptical, with Tesla stock down 37% this year. A federal judge has ordered the Trump administration to resume operations of Voice of America and other US-funded broadcasters after they were shut down unceremoniously last month. Over 1,000 employees and 600 contractors had in fact been impacted. The judge ruled that the move in fact violated congressional mandates to maintain press freedom and export American values. And Canada has set a new record for early voter turnout, with 7.3 million ballots cast, only ahead of the country's federal election. Now, that's a quarter of all eligible voters, up 25% from the last election, with just days to go before Canadians head to polls on the 28th of April. That's next Monday. The race is heating up. Liberal leader Mark Carney holds a slim lead still over Conservative rival Pierre Poilievre. My colleague Maha Siddiqui, meanwhile, brings us the latest developments straight from Vancouver.
Canada saw a record number of voters turning out for the advance polling over the long weekend from Friday to Monday. 7.3 million people cast their ballot over the 4 days, which was a 25% jump from the numbers seen during advance polling in 2021. Election Canada, though encouraged with these numbers, is being cautious, not willing to take any guesses as to whether the final voter turnout is going to be any better than 2021. The last time around, Canada saw 63% voter turnout, with the voter turnout among the youth being at 47%, much less than the national average. And that is why special arrangements were made for the young voters this time around, with 100 universities and colleges across Canada setting up special voting booths for the youngsters last week here in Canada. The Election Canada believes that this would have encouraged more voters, more younger people to turn out and be participants in the electoral process. The numbers that we are seeing this time around, and what was seen during the advance polling specifically, with long queues and people having to wait to cast their ballots, suggests two reasons why people want to be participating in these elections so crucially. One, the Trump factor, that is the threat from the US, both the economic coercion as well as the annexation threat, which is making voters turn out in large numbers to be able to give a clear mandate to one of the two parties. Yes, This election has turned into a two-horse race in Canada between the Liberals and the Conservatives. The other two parties, that is the NDP and Bloc Québécois, have constantly seen their support dwindling during these elections, and this is largely because the voters of these two parties as well, or the supporters rather of these two parties want to vote either the Liberals or the Conservatives so that one side gets a clear majority and is able then to take on US President Donald Trump more firmly. And here's where Mark Carney scores above Pierre Poilievre, at least that's what the opinion polls suggest. Mark Carney has continued to stay ahead in the perception that he can be a better Prime Minister for Canada because of him being a banker, an economist. He has been the former governor of Bank of England and Bank of Canada, and during his stint as governor of Bank of Canada, he was able to keep inflation within limits that is up to between 1 to 3%, and therefore he is looked on as a much favorable candidate, somebody who will be able to take on US President Donald Trump firmly. Meanwhile, Mark Carney has been using this image as well, talking tough and also hitting out at the Conservatives on this count. After the Conservatives released their costed platform on Tuesday, Mark Carney attacked Pierre Poilievre, saying that his party lacked any vision to take on US President Donald Trump. On the other hand, Pierre Poilievre has released his costed platform where he says that he will reduce the deficit while being able to bring some relief for the middle class, as well as some relief in the housing crisis as well that has been seen in Canada. In fact, both inflation and the housing crisis were seen as the major issues for this election before the 20th of January, when President Trump took office, and the annexation threats and the economic coercion in the form of tariffs towards Canada tilted things in favor of the Liberals, and specifically Mark Carney. There was a change of leadership in the Liberal Party as well. Mark Carney, in fact, emerging victorious there by numbers that were even better than what Justin Trudeau saw when he became the leader of the Liberal Party. Hence, at the current moment, even though the Conservatives have been able to close in on the gap that was seen over the last many weeks between the Liberals and the Conservatives in opinion poll, however, the Liberals continue to remain ahead in opinion polls, entering the final lap, that is the final week of campaign here in Canada. The election takes place on the 28th of April.
Well, that's all we have for you today. Much more on the other side.